What's going on, guys? Toeknee here, coming at you with another tier list where we look to rank some of the most important but least discussed things in the game of For Honor. This one is going to be, if you've seen my channel recently, the past few days, I've tried to inform people in For Honor about the sprint attack. Make sure that they're aware of it because it could come out at any time and you want to be ready to make sure you don't get hit by it, right? It's very important that you do so. Now, sprint attacks kind of vary in this game, let's be honest. There are kind of lethal sprint attacks and then non-lethal sprint attacks, basically. And what I mean by like a non-lethal one is something such as like Conqueror's Shield Bash from Sprint, or like Shinobi's Slide Tackle. Even though it confirms damage, the sprint attack itself is not damaging. So when I look at actually the rankings on this one, it's going to be kind of fucking weird, I'm not even going to lie. I'd take into account ones that just straight up damage from the get-go, right out the gate, a little bit better than those that don't. And then some characters actually have access to multiple sprint attacks, and they have access to maybe one lethal sprint attack and one non-lethal option for a sprint attack, and that could kind of make their stuff jump a little bit higher in the tier list versus one if they just had just a non-lethal sprint attack, because that's not as cool in my opinion. Alright, this is just my opinion. Obviously we do tiers S through D, D being dog shit, S being super sweet, and we'll just go ahead and get started with the D tier. So starting in the D tier, we have Conqueror, which Conqueror, yes, it's just a little heavy shield bash basically. Doesn't confirm anything for Conqueror, not even a light attack. You might be able to confirm like a hit for your teammate or maybe potentially get a kill for them, but you yourself will not get anything, so that is why it is so low on the list. The next one in the D tier is going to be PK. PK, again, does not have a damaging sprint attack. They have a sprint guard break, and although it is kind of unexpected and might be a little bit fast, your opponent can just counter guard break, which is pretty easy to do in the game. This next one is probably a bit controversial because it's kind of 90% of the reason this character is actually like in the A tier, and that's Shinobi's Slide Tackle. The mix-ups with this is actually what makes Shinobi a pretty viable character, but the sprint attack itself is not damaging, so I have to deduct points on it. I just have to, based on my criterion. So although it does have a good mix-up potential and allows you to confirm damage after, the sprint attack itself is just a slide tackle, and that does not do damage, which is why it is in the D tier. The final one in the D tier is going to be Shaolin. Again, somewhat similar with Shinobi. Shaolin just has like a non-damaging sprint attack, but then gets confirmed damage after it with a light after the kick. But again, it's just non-damaging, right? You're going to go up into the game, right? A Shaolin tries to run up to you and kick you. You're already going to be aware of that, and you're going to counter him effectively, all right? He's not throwing his staff at you from a sprinting, which would be absolutely terrifying. It's a long staff. You don't want to get hit by that. But the fact that he resorts to kicking you instead, it's got to be put in the D tier. Now, moving into the C tier, these are basically some lethal sprint attacks, but are just absolutely shit, honestly, in my opinion. Starting off, the first one is going to be Highlander. Highlander has a double swing sprint attack, but let me tell you, it's 900 MS and then 1000 MS for the 2 hits, which doesn't really justify the 20 and 25 damage that you get from it. You're most likely not going to do it. You wouldn't even want to use it to clear minions because his zone is much better for that. It's just not a great sprint attack overall in the game. Gladiator is going to be the next one in the C tier. Gladiator's one is pretty slow as well. It's 600 MS. You can still react to it really well. If they miss the attack, right, they can follow up with a bamboozle, but that has to mean that you completely whiff the sprint attack, and 99% of the time you're either potentially going to get a hit through with the sprint attack or it's going to get blocked or parried. I'd say probably 80% of the time it gets blocked or parried, and it's just not really a great option, and that follow-up bamboozle is essentially just useless on the attack. The next one in the C tier I'm going to say is Kensei. Kensei just seems to me like he has a worse version of the Raider sprint attack. It does less damage, and it kind of has like the same like trajectory, but it's just not as wide of an angle, so you can't hit as many things with Kensei's sprint attack. Again, it is pretty darn slow when you look at it. It's 700 MS, so it's pretty easy to dodge and parry, and since it doesn't really cover a large like area of effect on it, it's just not that good. Next one in the list is going to be Orochi, and Orochi's is just like a speed damage trade-off basically. Isn't that great. It's like 600 or 700 MS to throw the attack through, and it's only 17 damage, which if you look at it is one of the lowest sprint attack damages in the games. I think it's only greater than that of Lawbringer and Warden, which those ones honestly offer more utility anyways, so that's kind of why you would want to use those a little bit more, and why Orochi's is not used too frequently. The final character in the C tier that we're going to be looking at for the sprint attack is going to be the Black Prior. Now, I will say the one thing that's kind of good about the Black Prior, it's got really good range on it, so you can kind of catch your opponent off guard with it. But when I say you can kind of catch your opponent off guard, it might be kind of difficult due to the fact that it's 1000 MS for the sprint attack to actually go through. Very, very slow. Does okay damage at 25, honestly, and it's got good range, but the fact that it is so damn slow makes it a pretty easy one for your opponents to avoid. Now we're moving into the B tier. B tier are basically, again, lethal sprint attack moves, but kind of offer something a little bit extra than the ones in the C tier. And starting off with this, we're going to go with Centurion. Centurions is, while not that great of one, honestly, it's pretty darn slow, to be completely honest. It's like 900 MS, it's like the jumping heavy, but it does have the hyper armor effect on it. And honestly, if you're able to maybe sprint off there, if you get hit by someone else, your attack will still go through, and that's the only reason really why it's made it itself into B tier. Next up, we have Valkyrie, which Valkyries, again, most sprint attacks that you're going to see in the game are pretty slow. Valkyries being 800 MS and doing 20 damage. It does have a large arc to it, so you can sometimes potentially hit multiple enemies with the sprint attack. And honestly, it is really good at kind of tracking down and catching up to your enemies because it does have very nice tracking and range to it. Next one is going to be Aramusha. Now, Aramusha does have the option of almost like a double sprint attack. If you miss the first attack, you can follow it up with a second one, just in case, which kind of honestly has a lot of good range to it. Both of them do 25 damage, and the speed of the attacks, I believe, is both 700, but you can actually catch up to an opponent relatively quickly. And if they see that you missed the first one, they might not be thinking that you're going to follow up with the second attack, and you can often catch your opponents off guard with that. Next one we're going to be looking at in the B tier is going to be the Tiandi. Now, Tiandi has a pretty interesting sprint attack. It's one of those ones that has kind of an interesting animation to it, so it makes it kind of awkward to look at, and it does pretty good damage at 25, and it'll track you very well as well. So honestly, if you're running to catch up to someone, you're probably a good chance to use the sprint attack because it's going to track to them, and you'll probably get a hit off there because the timing from like the animation of the attack looks a little awkward and can be difficult for people to parry. And honestly, I've had a lot of times to where myself I've used the Tiandi sprint attack and I'm able to get some connections on there with enemies who are running away or running to like a different point from me. So that's why it's in the B tier. Now these next two are kind of similar. So first, looking at Shaman. Shaman's is pretty good. It's honestly relatively a quick sprint attack, to be completely honest. It does 20 damage, and I believe it's I think it's like 700 MS that it actually is, and it's like a very good range for the sprint attack. Honestly, if you look at it, it's pretty similar to the aspect of when she's locked on and does your dash heavies. It's kind of like the same style of that, although the sprint attack does go into the top stance, so it is good at tracking people down and has really good range to it, like probably one of the best ranges in the game for sprint attack. But it is able to kind of be dodged out and countered, so that's why it's nowhere higher than B. Now this one could arguably be a little bit lower than B if you think about it, because it's Nucia, and the fact is that hers is a light attack when she does a sprint attack. So if you get a parry, that's essentially a light parry, so that you can punish her a little bit more, and it's essentially kind of the same type of animation that that Shaman has, is the same for Nucia. Basically the same attack when you kind of look at them. They do 20 damage each again, but the Nucia's is honestly a little bit more risky due to the fact that it's a light attack rather than a heavy, which is why you can't put it any higher on the list. Now we're moving ourselves into the A tier. Now the A tier is ones that honestly we're going into an instance where a lot of these characters have both a lethal and non-lethal option for the sprint attack. And now when you have both of these options, you make yourself a formidable force on the battlefield, and honestly someone that you don't want to mess with. Now, coming off at A is going to be Raider. Now, people might be thinking, but Toeknee, he has a Stampede charge, and let me tell you right now, that's not what I'm looking at. The Stampede charge is a secondary. He's got this big, massive axe swing that has very good range. Like I said earlier, it's just kind of a better version of Kensei's. It's got a nice arc to it, and it's got better range, which is why you can kind of catch people out there. And the fact that you can Stampede charge again is just a little icing on the cake with this one. And the reason that it's not S is because the sprint lethal attack itself isn't the strongest, although Stampede charge is very strong. I'm still looking at the damaging attack to be the first thing that I look at on this list. The next one we're looking at is Warlord, which is kind of similar to that of Raider. He's got two options, right? You can either do a jumping heavy that does 35 damage, which is the highest damaging sprint attack in the game and has hyper armor on it, or you can go into a crashing charge, which is very good mix-up material. Now, the fact that you're able to kind of do a lot of damage and have hyper armor on that makes it a pretty decent sprint attack to use. The one thing that kind of knocks it down, making it not into the S tier, is the fact that it's 900 MS, so your opponent still can react to that pretty easily, but you can then also open up with the crashing charge, which is a thing that a lot of warlords do, so that's pretty strong as well. Next, we're looking at the Berserker. Now, the whole reason that the Berserker is on here is that although it is not one of the fastest attacks, it is one of the highest damaging attacks. Although it doesn't have hyper armor on it, it does do 33 damage, which is the, like I said, the second highest sprint attack in the game besides the Warlord. And no one really comes in comparison to that amount of damage. If you're looking at all the numbers, the other ones do 25. That would be the next highest. And then having an increase right there of just 8 damage if you get a connect on the sprint attack is very good. But again, it's not the fastest and you don't have hyper armor on it, so that's why I can't really put it into the S tier. Next, we're looking at the big boy, Shigoki. And Shigoki's, although again, relatively slow, does have hyper armor on it, and the thing that is really good with Shigoki's is the fact that you can flow into your combo finishers right out of the sprint attack. So say you want to run through, throw a sprint attack, bop someone on the head, go for a little and then you kill them. So that's good stuff right there. But again, it's not the fastest and people can react to it pretty easily. It comes from the top, so it doesn't really have a wide swing effect to it. It's just basically straight up and down. People can dodge out of the way relatively easily, which is why it's not quite into the S tier. The final character that we have in the A tier is going to be Nobushi. Now, Nobushi has two different options that you can do for a sprint attack. She has a heavy, which would do 17 damage, which is kind of similar, I would say, to Kensei's attack. The fact that it does 17 kind of doesn't make it that great, but Nobushi does have another option that she can use for a sprint attack, and that's if she throws a light. It does 6 initial damage plus 20 bleed, which is just another good option to do, and this is a good thing that you might want to use potentially in 4v4s. Maybe you got a shaman on your team, maybe you run up sprint, give him a little stab with the light attack, get a little bleed action, and then you get your face bitten off. So the fact that you got options on Nobushi is what puts her into the A tier, but not into the S, because again, they are relatively slow and kind of easy to react to. The heavy being 700 MS and then the light being 600 MS. You can still react to them, but if you do get the hits off on there, you can kind of get some pretty significant damage, especially with the light attack. Now, we are moving into the S tier. Now, these are the best sprint attacks in the game, the ones that you definitely want to know about when you're on the battlefield. And starting off, we're going to go with Jang Jun. Jang Jun's is pretty darn similar to that of Tiandi's in the way that it kind of tracks you very well, but Jang Jun's is more like on steroids. Let me tell you, I don't know if I've ever seen a sprint attack that tracks as much as this one does. Holy crap. Plus, it does 20 and 25 damage, and pretty much you get hit by the first one, you're going to be getting hit by the second one because you're probably in hit stun and you don't lock yourself back on quick enough, and you're going to be getting hit like there for 20 and then 25 damage, which is pretty damn good for finishing off people who try to run away from you. Let me tell you what, the amount of times that I've killed and have been killed by a JJ sprint attack is actually pretty damn high. So that's why he's in the S tier. The insane tracking plus the pretty good damage from it. The next one that we are going to have in the S tier is going to be Warden. Now, Warden is tied for the lowest damage sprint attack in the game with Lawbringer, but main reason we have it on here is it's such a quick tool to use. You can kind of mix up your opponents. Say you're running unlock, you can probably throw out a sprint attack, you can do a zone, or you can go for maybe a guard break, which can really kind of make your mix-up game a little bit stronger, and it is probably, it's one of the fastest, it's the second fastest sprint attack in the game at 400 MS, which is very hard for a lot of people to react to. You can block it often, but how many times have you parried a Warden sprint attack in your life? Probably a couple, but honestly, with the amount that are thrown out, it's just not that significant, and you can usually get a nice little hit on there with the Warden, which is why it's an S. The final character in the S tier is going to be Lawbringer, and let me just tell you 2 things, guys. Choo-choo. 3 things, actually. Choo-choo, motherfucker. Alright? Not only is the sprint attack the fastest in the game at 300 MS, it is one of the best ganking tools in the entire game. Unlike Raider, who has to pick you up and kind of throw you, it doesn't do any damage. Lawbringer, he just stabs you in the ass real quick, okay? let me tell you, that man stabs you in the ass, puts you into a wall. You know what that guarantees? It guarantees a top heavy. That's a lot of damage. Plus, you can guarantee a lot of damage for your team. Nice setup. You can ledge people with it. It's just an all-around really great sprint attack. Now, the Lawbringer has all the good stuff where it matters, right? He's got the best executions. He's got some sick fashion, and he's got an awesome sprint attack. This is just definitely some statistics right here that make sense that this character definitely needs a rework, because while we have all the not talked about things that are so super high on the Lawbringer, but we need to make the actual kit for him pretty good. Now that's going to do it for this list. I'll put him like master list up on the screen right here. Let me know what you guys think. This is probably the most interesting one that I've created, because no one really talks about the sprint attacks, but you know, with your guys' help, we can make the world know about these attacks and kind of, you know, show them the credit that they deserve, because you know, sometimes you're just trying to run away and then you get stabbed in the ass by a little pokey stick from Lawbringer, and then you're off the ledge and then you're dead. So let me know what you guys think, if you think anything on this list is wrong. Again, this is just kind of a humorous opinionated list, so don't take anything too seriously. I know some of you will, because that's just the nature of the internet, but if you enjoyed, leave yourselves a like, comment, and subscribe. It's been your boy Toeknee. Talk to you in the next one. Peace.